Hey listeners, it's Jana. Welcome back to Grief Out Loud. Today I'm talking with Christina Babich, a psychologist who specializes in grief and trauma, and who also brings her own lived experience with both of those into her work. In 2021, Christina was living in Europe with her partner Alex. They were building a life together and dreaming of their next steps. When on a visit to his family in Italy, Alex died suddenly of a brain aneurysm. Alex's death not only shattered Christina's day-to-day life and her future plans, but also left her navigating the trauma she experienced from witnessing Alex's last moments. In our conversation, Christina shares what it's like to grieve a death that feels out of order, how trauma can be overlooked when someone is grieving, and why being seen and believed matters so much for the people who are left behind. We also talk about the pressure placed on people who are grieving to be resilient, to grow, or to turn their pain into something productive, and what support can actually look like instead. Christina introduced me to the term quasi-widow, which she uses to describe the experience of grieving for a partner when you weren't officially married, and how that can lead to a disparity in the amount of support that others offer you, and sometimes even the amount of grief you feel entitled to yourself. Okay, here's our conversation. Christina, welcome to Grief Out Loud. Thanks for making time and space to have this conversation together.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your partner, Alex.
Yeah, Alex was a wonderful human being. He was very warm, steady, deeply kind, always wanting to help other people, emotionally really attuned to others. He made people feel safe just by being in the room, and he was also very brave. He had lived in a lot of different countries and had a lot of success in his career, and then walked away from that to lead a life that felt a little bit more aligned with where he was at the time. He was really good at putting himself out there, even when it was uncomfortable. And just from all of those things and how he lived life very beautifully from his heart, he's still somebody that I look up to, even, over 4 years now since he's passed away. Our relationship was really beautiful. It was grounded in mutual respect, lots of humor. He really took amazing care of me, cooked all my meals, and we had a really beautiful shared vision of building our life together and what that would look like overseas. And he wasn't just my partner, he was my home, my anchor, and yeah, we fell into each other's lives really quickly and things just kind of lined up like a beautiful puzzle. And yeah, he was an amazing person.
And it seems like, too, you were in a place in your relationship where you were really embarking on a lot of shared collaborative adventures.
Yeah, absolutely. We met when we were both living as expats in Amsterdam, and we were both working in yoga. And I was in my kind of early mid 30s at the time, and he was in his early mid 40s. So we were both switching into careers. I was switching into the career that I'm in now, and he was kind of still looking to see what was out there, but we both really wanted to have an international family overseas and travel a lot and just be home to each other.
And you mentioned that he died in 2021, and I'm wondering what feels important to share about his death.
I don't even see it. I think that the main thing I'd like to share is a lot of times when somebody passes away and the person is there, people focus a lot on just the grief aspect, but his death was also like a significant traumatic event in my life because he was Italian and we were visiting his family in Italy. It was during the pandemic. It was the week of his parents' 50th wedding anniversary. And he was absolutely fine. Like 1 second he was riding, cycling on a bike, a road bike, and eating a pizza and drinking a beer, and we were cracking jokes. And then the next second we were in our villa room and he was just suddenly on the floor dying of a brain aneurysm that we had no idea that he had. in addition to, like screaming and getting them to call the paramedics, I also was holding him while he passed away, while he died, and was with his body after. It's been a challenge and also something that a lot of people go through where we have to deal with the grief side and everything in our lives totally being shattered. And then at the same time, also dealing with the mental health and the nervous system aspect of surviving a deeply traumatic event. So for me, it would be the grief and then the loss and the trauma together. That would be the most important aspects of his death.
It's so important to be able to talk about how those things are, maybe how they overlap, and also how they're two very distinct entities, and that it seems
Yes.
like the world, whatever we describe as the world, is getting a little bit better or more informed about asking about the grief, like tell us about Alex and tell us about your life together and what you miss about that. But there doesn't seem to be as many avenues or opportunities to have people share that story of the trauma of the actual death. And I'm curious, how did that show up for you in the days and weeks and months after his death, that the trauma piece for you?
Um, I mean, I think by a lot of people, if I'm being totally honest, it was really like overlooked. I think I don't necessarily know though if that was on purpose. I think that like in addition to myself being shocked, traumatized, like totally nervous system not functioning, like my tongue wasn't even working properly when I spoke. It was also very shocking for the people that were close to me. Like I heard, my friends' voices when they would send me a voice note or call me, and I didn't even almost recognize my friends' voices. So people were not really able to, like majority, to handle that, have provide space for that. Obviously, some were, but most weren't. But again, I don't know that. I mean, okay, everybody knows that when people are grieving, unfortunately, people in our lives can be not the best. So I'm sure some of that came up too, but I think a lot of people were also equally as shocked and kind of traumatized in a smaller sense as I was, just because they cared about me. And for them, it was like 1 second our conversations were about baby names and wedding dresses. And then the next second, it's me saying all of a sudden that my partner's passed away. I'm at a funeral. I'm packing up all our belongings in our shared apartment. So that would be really like shocking for my friends as well too. So I don't necessarily put people at fault for that, but I think that people just there's also like no playbook. There's no guide on how to communicate or treat your friend who has been through a sudden and traumatic loss. The people who I thought did the best were the ones who were just really honest. Like just a text being like, "Hey, Christina, I just want you to know I'm thinking about you. I'm really sorry that this happened. I have no idea what to say, but I just want you to know I'm feeling like awful for you and for your loss." And I thought that was really fair because it was really honest.
Yeah, to just acknowledge what happened and what is happening.
Yeah, and the fact that they don't know what to say, like they don't that's human and that's real, right? Sometimes things happen to people in our lives and we don't know how to help them, but telling them like I just want you to know I'm thinking about you, it means a lot.
That there's some tethers still out in the world to people who are thinking about us and caring about us.
Yeah.
People get caught off guard a lot by what the grief can look and feel like in terms of the variety of emotions or how it might impact us physically over time. You mentioned in the immediate aftermath after Alex died, like that your mouth, your tongue wasn't working, like your ability to speak wasn't working, and recognition of
hmm
voices had changed. What were some of the other, like quote unquote, symptoms of how the trauma impacted you?
That's a great question. I was in a state that's called derealization. So derealization is when we literally think like our brain becomes so dissociated to protect us, so that we start to view the world like it's a dream. So nothing felt real. It was also just because we had lived abroad, and I had been away from Amsterdam for a little bit before Alex left, and then we met in Italy because I was visiting family back in Canada, that he was alone in the apartment for a while. So when I walked into the apartment after he had passed away, it just smelt so much like him. It was kind of like a wall, hitting a wall of his smell, and then having to go through all of his stuff. On top of that, leaving Amsterdam, because when you're expats and you meet somewhere, you kind of talk about how you're going to leave the city together. That kind of becomes your first big kind of profession of like your love and how you're going to do life together, like outside of that place. I was just in Canada. I wasn't supposed to be back for a very long time. All of a sudden, I'm back in Canada. And then the day that we were supposed to come back from our holiday together is the day that I started doing trauma therapy. So that was also just extremely disorienting. So there was so many layers to it that were disorienting for my nervous system. My nervous system was just going through like pretty much any symptom you look at for PTSD. I couldn't sleep. I was having nightmares, flashbacks. It was hard to concentrate, to follow what people were saying. I talked to people who met me during that time, and they told me that I kind of was like a ghost. People would say hi to me, and sometimes I would like notice that they said hi, but I was like, there's no point in even saying hi back. Our brain does a lot of really unhelpful things, thinking that it's protecting ourselves, and that was kind of like another like roller coaster ride as well too. But luckily, I got, very incredible therapy, one of which was called cognitive processing therapy, and that really helped to process things properly. And I actually am certified in that now. And I do that a lot with my clients because it really, really helped me. But yeah, I think there's kind of like the cognitive piece. And then on the other side, there's also the nervous system piece because now my nervous system, naturally to keep me safe, is being often hypervigilant regarding not wanting another loss like that to happen. So that continues to be something that even though I work in mental health, I still have to, I don't know the right word, cope with or experience regularly from my traumatic event.
And with that hypervigilance, I know that can look different for different people. I hear a lot of people talk about like an increase in anxiety around their health or the health of other people, or just feeling nervous about doing new things or trying new things. Is there a particular signature style to your hypervigilance?
Yeah, I get anxious and like if I call my mom and my mom doesn't answer me right away, I'm like, "Oh my God, is everything okay?" So, yeah, I definitely care about losing people now more than it came up for me previously. I thought because my father had died in 2018 from cancer, so I kind of thought that I knew grieve. When Alex passed away, that's when I really realized like I really didn't know anything about it at all. I just knew what it was like to lose a parent to cancer. And also Alex's death is what they call like an out of order death. So that means that he's still, he's passed away now, but his parents and his older brother are still alive. So the natural order would be, grandparents, parents, and then children would pass away. So when someone dies and it's out of order and it's so sudden and so unexpected, it really is a lot different than somebody passing away and you have, they've been sick for a long time and you know that they're ill and they're quite a lot older than you, etc.
Yeah, it's almost as if there's a map, and when it feels like a death that's in order, which kind of feels strange to say, like they all seem like they're
Yeah.
out of order in some way, but in that idea of like, in terms of generations, so there's like a place on the map where that belongs. But it sounds like with Alex's death, it's like there's no map, and I don't know where to put this.
Yeah, I still don't know where to put it. It's been 4.5 years. It's still one of those things I'll kind of be doing something and all of a sudden I'll still be like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened to me. Or to him, he was so healthy. He was really, really into yoga. He taught 22 yoga classes the week before he passed away. He was really into like long distance road cycling. He ate super healthy. He didn't smoke. There was nothing like about his lifestyle that would make you think, oh, this person's going to die a premature death. It was quite the opposite. And the year that he passed away, he had a lot of like blood work and stuff done, and everything came back amazing. So he thought he was in great health.
So to have it just come so completely out of the blue.
Yeah.
You mentioned the cognitive reprocessing therapy that you said was really helpful for you. I wonder,
Yeah.
for folks who aren't familiar with it, if you could just share a little bit about what that process is like.
Yeah, I'd love to. So essentially, what happens in cognitive reprocessing therapy is it's for people who've survived traumatic events. You start off by writing what's called an impact statement. So you write about the event that you went through, but we don't write about what happened. We want to know the why. Why do you think that this event happened to you? And then how has it changed beliefs that you have for yourself, other people, and then the world? The world could be like the universe, God, whatever your conceptualization of that is. And then we look in different themes such as safety, power and control, trust, esteem, intimacy, etc. And then we try to grab in the therapy, they call them stuck points, but it's just a core belief that's just not adaptive to the situation. And then we really look at the evidence and the facts for them. When I wrote it about an unrelated kind of event. And then because they didn't want me at the time because it was so fresh to talk about Alex's death. But obviously, as you are going through and you're creating your list of core beliefs, things kind of come up. And it was really fascinating. I had a stuck point down or a thought down that if Alex hadn't met me, he would still be alive. And I know that sounds like absolutely ridiculous, right? Because how do I have anything to do with somebody's neurons and the way that their brain is? But that's really common when people go through trauma. Our brains, our nervous system doesn't understand what's happening, doesn't have the logic and the reason sometimes that our mind does. So in those gaps, it creates truths that it thinks are helpful. And I think that was also maybe a way to subconsciously for my brain to make me think I had like some control. And then obviously, when we looked at the facts for that, I realized that was completely untrue. Alex would have passed away either way. And I don't like to look at like the grass is always, or not, probably not the grass is always greener. What do they call it? The silver lining. But like, because I don't believe that traumatic events or huge losses have like everything happens like those platitudes I don't buy into them. But I am grateful for him that if this horrible thing was going to happen to him that would take his life, that he wasn't alone and I was with him and I was holding his hand and I he wasn't able to talk when he died, but I hope that he felt some safety in that.
So it's identifying this kind of core belief you have around the situation or the trauma, and then kind of holding it up under the scrutiny to be like, is that actually true? And it sounds like you landed on something that's almost not the opposite, but to be able to hold onto that place of like, since this did happen, I am also glad I was there with him.
I am, yeah, yeah. So with the cognitive processing, we look at like what people are thinking because a lot of times people are holding on to things that are not theirs to hold on to. A really popular one is people have, they have there's part of the therapy that goes into like levels of responsibility, and we'll realize, okay, like, if something was unforeseeable, I can feel sad or feel grief about that, like Alex's passing, for example, but like I don't have any responsibility for the fact that he died, neither does he. Neither of us are at fault, right? Anytime something has ever come up where somebody's judging me a little bit, maybe for talking about Alex's death or something, I kind of remind them, like, this is a really awful thing that happened. And like, I'm not at fault for Alex passing away, and he's not at fault either. It's something that happened to both of us. It might make other people uncomfortable for me at times to share what happened, but it did happen to me. And I think that I have a right to share my story just like anybody else has a right to share one of their stories.
And that seems like that gets into that place of people's comfort or discomfort with other people's grief and story. And there is some of that trying to figure out like which part of this is my story to tell. Which makes me want to ask another question about how when someone dies, it oftentimes recalculates all of our relationships. And I wondered if you could talk about how that's been a part of your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've become a lot more private in some ways. I don't like to share everything with everybody. Not that I was like, the biggest open book in the world, but I kind of was. It was kind of like, hey, whatever. Whereas I'm a little bit more careful now about who I talk to about this. I'm really lucky that I do have some really good support people that I can be honest with. But honestly, I think that the thing that has helped the most is when I've met other people who are I call myself a quasi widow because I'm kind of widowed, but I also wasn't married, so like I'm not. But there's been a couple times where I've met someone else whose partners had passed away. It feels really good to talk to them because I'm just saying something about my experience and they're just nodding. There's a lot of power in that nod. It's like a hug. Like there's just someone seeing you, understanding, also knowing that they don't understand, and there's shared understanding in that too. I mean, they're very rare because I was 34 when Alex passed away. Most people don't lose their partner when they're 34. And it also, has impacted like I had a biological clock at that age and stuff too, right? So it's like you think you're going to have a family and then all of a sudden you're widowed, traumatized, and your biology is continuing. It doesn't care about that timeline. So it was a lot to process and to deal with, and it still is. But when people also just like listen and don't try to fix and just go, yeah, that sounds really hard. That's awful. That can mean a lot too, right? I think that a lot of people, not just myself, but people who are grieving, it means a lot to be around people who get it. Like I remember when I was doing a lot of therapy after Alex had passed away, I had a couple therapists here and there where they would say, "Oh yeah, like my partner committed suicide or my child died of sudden infant death syndrome or something like that." And I don't really know how to describe it, but it's like the energy in the room just changed. There was like a shared understanding. So that's also why I specialize in trauma and also in grief with my clients, is because when you've been that person in the room and just someone else understanding has been so impactful, you want to give that to somebody else. So I'd already worked on switching my career to psychology. And when it became time to choose what I was going to specialize in, it was like really, I didn't even really think about it. It just kind of naturally just kind of came because it's also really helpful for my healing to talk to people who've been through grief and trauma too, because it feels like good to give that space to other people and to hear other people's perspectives who've been through really big life-altering events.
I appreciate the term you used of quasi widow. And
Hmm.
I wonder, do you have a sense that the type of support or the amount of support that you were offered or felt like you were entitled to would have been different if you and Alex had been officially married?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of comments like, how long did you know him? You weren't together, that long, or this or that, and just kind of talking to me like I don't really know anybody in his life. And, we were living together. I shared things with Alex within a couple of weeks of knowing him that I hadn't shared with my previous partner that I was with for 3 years. Not because I was hiding something from my previous partner. I just didn't think to talk to him about certain things. Like I think that, when like you're madly and deeply like in love with somebody and you feel like your souls are really connecting and you're each other's like whole universe all of a sudden. I know that sounds really cheesy, but seriously, that's what it felt like. You have conversations with them and talk to them about things that you just don't talk to with other people and don't experience with other people. So, yeah, I think if we were actually married, it would have been very different for sure.
Yeah, that people would have perhaps seen you as having a more legitimate, I don't know what, like reason to be feeling how you were feeling, or just afforded more space and respect as someone who was grieving him as deeply as you were.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't want to like call out anybody specifically in his life, but like the morning, the 48 hours after he had passed away, I ran into somebody who was close to him and I said, I'm not okay. And he was like, well, Christina, like nobody's okay. Kind of like I didn't have a right to be, I don't know the right word, like like kind of taking some of the spotlight, I guess, but it was just the two of us talking. And then I spoke later and I said, look, I understand that like everybody is, very, very upset right now. And this is a huge loss for a lot of people. I also just lost my partner, my best friend, my home. I don't know what country I'm going to be living in anymore. I've quit my job. I was, still going to school. I'm like, I'm not going back to school next semester. It was starting in a couple of weeks. That wasn't an option. I am planning on getting married. That's off the table now. I'm, no longer thinking about when I'm going to have a baby. Like my entire life is gone. So like I completely understand that a lot of people are hurting and this is like something that I can't relate to for them and vice versa, but I'm unfortunately, it's a fact, the only person who's like without a job and unhoused right now and also totally traumatized because I was also with him when I died. Like you guys weren't. And then also too, like somebody as well after the funeral who was very close to him also told me, you're really young, like you'll find someone else, you're going to be fine. There's people, I don't see people that replaceable. It's not like Alex has passed away, so now someone else is going to come and like kind of fill his role exactly. Like Alex is the only person that I've ever been in a relationship with who I cannot technically call on the phone right now. I can't check in with him. I can't see how he's doing. And I've had to mourn losing the relationship in the future, but I also, at the same time, also mourn losing him as a close person to me. Like it would be amazing just to, at this point, if he was still alive, just to be able to pick up the phone and have a conversation with him for even 10 minutes. And I can't do that. So it's been, yeah, it was a lot. And it's very challenging to be, yeah, to be a quasi widow.
I will offer, I think that you're young, you'll find someone else. That one seems to be liberally applied whether you're married or not. I feel like I've heard that from so many folks who, when it was their spouse or their partner who died, that's like a phrase people get a lot of like, don't worry, you're young, you'll meet somebody new.
Yeah, exactly. Or people will tell me that they know somebody whose person died and now they're married and have, a baby, so it's going to be fine. I don't know what the future holds for myself or for other people who are like, widowed and young, but it might not be fine. And that's also okay too. I do believe in post-traumatic growth. I do think that if you have, PTSD and go through a traumatic event, you can absolutely get to a place where you can learn a lot from it, become a better person. I genuinely hope that I've reached a phase of post-traumatic growth in some aspects for my journey, absolutely. But we seem to put a lot of pressure on people who are bereaved to kind of be these like stronger, better versions of themselves. I even notice it just in like movies and stuff. Like, for example, over Christmas, I was watching like a Christmas movie and the kids are helping Santa do something. And of course, the kid's dad has passed away. So it's like they're supposed to be stronger and more helpful because they don't have a dad. Whereas in reality, they're probably in a lot more pain than, children who have a healthy father that's still present in their lives. And we see that kind of stuff a lot. If you're watching like a thriller movie, sometimes it's like the main character is this woman and her husband and her son died in a car accident and now she has to do this big thing and then she does it and she's so strong. And I really wish we didn't try to sell like bereaved people like that because like for example, after Alex had passed away, not even for 48 hours, a friend of mine was already talking to me about this book I'm gonna write and how it's going to help so many people and that's what I can do with this. And maybe I write a book about it one day and maybe I won't. That would be a really challenging thing to sit and write about a lot. So why like do we kind of as a culture expect things of people who are bereaved? It can be a little bit frustrating, I think, and it makes us feel more isolated rather and maybe not want to talk to people who don't quite get it because sometimes these kind of things can be pushed on us a little bit. I think of people who are bereaved and also who are trauma survivors as being an invisible minority because there's a lot of things in society that are not quite like designed for us in a way. So,
I think it's so important to talk about that pressure that people who have had someone in their life die or have experienced some other type of trauma of the, not only is it like, good job you're still here, right? Like you're getting up every day or most days and you're showering most days and going to the grocery store, whatever you're doing, like getting through the day. Seems like that should be like gold medal event right there. But then it's also like, how are you going to transform your pain and create this new thing in the world that's going to like save other people? And just like a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, I notice it individually for myself too, because I am a psychologist now who specializes in grief and in trauma. And sometimes people will say, like, look at all the people that you're helping. And I'm very, very, very grateful for my job and my clients and even to be talking to you right now. And I want to bring awareness to for other people who've been through the things that I've similar things as me. At the same time, though, I would hope that if Alex hadn't have passed away and maybe I were to specialize in something else rather in psychology, I'd still have the ability to help people. And in addition to that, too, that those people that I've helped specifically with trauma and grief doesn't make up for the fact that I went through a very traumatic event and Alex had to lose his life. That's another thing that kind of I've noticed a little bit. And I think that that happens a lot too for people who are bereaved and are working in that field. There seems to be this like, oh, well, this thing happened, but everything happens for a reason. Now you're doing this job and you're helping people. And it's like, well, no, like I would like to still be helping people, ideally for a different reason. Like I'm glad that you understand what I'm trying to say, right?
It's like, given what's happened, I'm glad I'm able to be helpful and useful to
Yes,
folks. And also, I wouldn't have minded if there was a different platform of being able to help and support people that wasn't directly related to this trauma and this grief and the death of my beloved partner.
exactly. Thank you for articulating that.
Speaking of your professional work, Christina, it sounds like you were kind of already in the process of studying to become a psychologist when Alex died. And as you went back to school and were learning, do you remember like what did you learn about grief and how did that match or not match with what you were personally experiencing?
Um, we didn't learn about it a ton. We learned obviously about the five stages of grief from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And I have to be honest in that I do think that those stages are relevant. David Kessler is pretty big in the grief community, and he wrote a book called Finding Meaning. And he said that for those of us who've studied a little bit about grief, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote the five stages for people who were going to die themselves. She didn't mean or intend for them to be written about people who were bereaved. So those stages, I don't know them quite now off the top of my head, but there's like anger, denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance. And he said that they should have had one more stage, which was called Finding Meaning. So he has a whole book about that, which I think is great that he, acknowledged that. Those topics, like in those themes, definitely come up when somebody dies because we do think, in denial in moments, like those moments where I said, in the beginning of our conversation, sometimes I'll just like walk into my house and be like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened to me. That's still part of my brain living in denial a bit, right? And then you also have moments of acceptance and then other moments of that doesn't happen for me much anymore, but bargaining. And sometimes I wouldn't describe it as anger, but maybe just feeling frustrated that things turned out the way that they did. That it doesn't seem fair, like stuff like that. And then of course, there is also moments as well of finding some meaning. I think that they are relevant themes. I don't think that people move through them linearly. I also think that grief is like very, very, very personal. A lot of times, too, we kind of talk about it almost like we talk about anxiety or depression or something. And obviously, people's mental health symptoms and way of describing anxiety and depression and stuff is very individual and very unique. I think that grief can be even like more individual and even more unique. And like mental, illness or something like this. I'm not saying it is, but like it, there's the cognitive aspect, like what we're thinking about the loss. There's the physical aspect, our nervous system's hypervigilant, then our whole life changes. So it's so embodied. I think it touches every piece of your life in ways that you probably can't even imagine from just reading about it in a book. After Alex had passed away, I did a lot of reading about grief. I read pretty much every grief book I could get my hands on, and some of them were helpful, and to be honest, some of them also weren't. And that just shows again how grief is really individual, and other people's interpretations of it and the way that they cope and they deal and they process is very different, right?
Looking back, which book in that part of your process felt the most relevant or helpful for you?
Yeah, I love the book The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Frances Weller. I think it's such a beautiful book. The whole book is about grief as like a concept, like from somebody dying all the way till he even uses an example of like a popular restaurant in the neighborhood closing and grief with that with the community. So I thought that was like an amazing book. And whenever I read a book and I'm thinking, oh, I really want to, like remember something from this, I like turn down the page. And if you look at the book that of my copy, pretty much the whole book is like turned down. So I think that's like yeah, an amazing book, and I've recommended it to people as well, like clients of mine who are going through divorce or are suffering other types of losses than just death, because he really yeah, he really like describes the grief experience and the collectiveness of it very, very, very well. So I love that book.
Well, that leads me to want to ask you a little bit about some of the work that you do. I know you focus a lot on grief and trauma, and on this show, we focus mostly on grief that comes from a death loss. But some of your work is around supporting people who have moved to a different country or left their home country, and that can come with a lot of grief. And it seems like Frances Weller's book also speaks to some of those non death losses and grief. I wonder if you could just share a little about what you've learned from the folks that you work with around how that type of grief shows up.
Yeah, absolutely. I obviously, from going through what I've been through and all the things I've read and everything after, I became really passionate in learning a lot about grief, helping other people identify with grief. Because grief is often so overlooked, a lot of times people can be experiencing it over something like maybe a past identity. In this podcast, in this conversation, I've been talking about my past identity when I was with Alex, and that identity is gone now. So in addition to grieving Alex's loss, I still also grieve, the person who I was before his death. Not that I'm not happy with who I am now, but just because my life was kind of different. There's kind of like before and then after in a way. And that comes up a lot when people move to other countries and or live as digital nomads. When we're in digital, I've done a few stays where you're in a place where there's a lot of like remote workers, and everybody's kind of coming together, everybody's working and stuff, and then eventually people leave. People go their opposite ways. Sometimes one or two people will come with you, and sometimes they won't. And you have to kind of grieve a close friendship that's now becoming long distance. The person's not there anymore. The community is not together anymore. Or maybe, as I spoke about already, like grieving identities. You have an identity in one place and then you move somewhere else and you have an identity in another place. For example, like when I was living in Amsterdam, I was, living with this guy who was amazing. I was teaching yoga, I was studying psychology, I was on my bike everywhere and going to the parks. And now I live a very different life, living in Budapest in a city, working as a therapist, and then also at the same time traveling quite a bit. And the point isn't that like one's better than the other, it's just they're different. And a lot of times when people move abroad, there's a lot of grief and a lot of loss around not being there with their parents who are aging, or not being with their little nieces and nephews, or raising children away from their family, or thinking that you were going to have one type of life in your home country and do what society kind of pushed you into a little bit. And for whatever reason, that didn't work out for you. And now you're living overseas and kind of rebuilding on your own. So there's a lot of grief and there's a lot of loss, and a lot of the people too that are in I'm not saying all, but a lot that are in expat and digital nomad communities also have experienced a lot of sometimes like traumatic or challenging events in their lives, and that's part of the reason why they want to, I think, feel the freedom and the expansiveness of travel and going overseas. But yeah, it's very, very interesting. And even connects to our nervous system because our nervous system loves movement. So if you're, in a new place and you're moving around and you're a little bit distracted, that can sometimes for some people feel like great coping. So it kind of, everybody's again different, and that's why with my clients, I really approach everybody as their own individual, and I see them as for their personality, but then at the same and the things they've been through, but at the same time also like their nervous system because everybody's body and nervous system is reacting to things kind of differently. And I look at it like we're kind of driving a car and then our nervous system is in the passenger seat. So sometimes our nervous system's helping us get to where we need to go. It's putting on very relaxing language and it's being very helpful. And then other times it thinks it's helping us and it's not shutting up. It's not, so yeah, so I try to meet people with the idea in my mind of okay, like they have their experiences, their coping, their personality, and stuff that they feel comfortable with, and at the same time, they also have their nervous system. And I think that that's something I probably got from doing a lot of yoga before and after Alex had passed away. Is like that's kind of me giving my nervous system a big hug.
You mentioned grieving like who you were before Alex died, as well as grieving him. And I know we had part of our conversation was about trying not to fall into that place of like, oh, look at all that you've done and this, how you've
Yeah.
transformed. But I do want to ask, like, what are you proud of yourself for in these last 4 years since Alex died?
Um, I am really impressed by my survival instincts. I had no idea that they were so strong. Like since he's passed away, there hasn't been, and I'm not saying this to say like I'm proud of this. It's just kind of like I'm like, whoa, like because there hasn't been a day where I've like just sat in bed crying all day and feeling sorry for myself. Like it just never happened. There was like, I mean, even when it first happened, I was like kind of trying to, and then I was like, no, no, I want to go to the apartment and like go through some of our stuff. And I don't necessarily credit that to like a personality trait that I have. I genuinely believe that I have a very strong survival instinct, and that instinct to just put one foot in front of the other has been there. I am really proud of the work I've done with other trauma survivors and guiding them through if it's, good for them at the time, CPT. If it's not, if it's psychoeducation or talking to them about the just world fallacy, that's the belief that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. And that can hurt a lot of people who've been through traumatic events. So even if it's just educating someone on stuff like that. But yeah, I'm really proud that I've continued to keep living. I still live overseas and I did some trips that me and Alex had talked about doing together, and I'm proud of myself for still doing those things. And I don't know what happens when we pass away. I don't really know what my beliefs are, but if he could see me, I think he would be very, very, very proud, and that makes me feel like I'm living in alignment, and I'm proud of that too.
I'm really appreciating you naming that survival instinct because I think a lot of folks, in anticipation of a loss or a death, think there's no way I'm not going to be able to, whatever that is. And that there's, for
Hmm.
many of us, some element that just kicks in and like we just do whatever we're doing. Like we keep doing this thing, whatever we're doing, even if it doesn't feel comfortable, it doesn't feel okay, and nothing about it is okay. But there is some element in us that oftentimes will just keep doing something.
Yeah, for me, it was just to keep living. Um, but I also want to say too, like, if you're not feeling okay, that's also totally okay. I remember really distinctly this one time when Alex had passed away, like in the very beginning, I was kind of like, okay, like, what are three things that I can actually do right now? And one of them was meditating. I can't even remember. I think one of the other ones was like drink water or something, like really basic. And when I tried to quote unquote meditate, the first time I was just literally sitting there just sobbing. So I don't really know if that was much of a meditation, but that's where I was at the time. But I remember about like 5 or 6 months later, I was feeling like the waves of grief. They were crashing and it felt like I couldn't breathe, right? Like, I don't mean that physically, I mean that like emotionally. And I was lying in bed and I got up and I sat on the floor and I was like, I'm just gonna sit like with this feeling. And I just sat with it and something just clicked in that moment. I'm not saying that it's like this every time it comes up, but in that moment it did, where I was like, okay, like I feel awful right now. I feel all the grief, all the anxiety, and okay, I'm sitting here on the floor and I'm holding it and I feel like terrible, but everything is okay. Like I actually am safe. Yeah, as I say, I wish that every time the grief wave came up, I was able to experience it that way. But I think that intentionally sitting with it in that moment made it feel okay. And that was a bit of a turning point for me where I was like, this is going to be very, very, very challenging. And some days are going to be awful, but I can handle it. If anybody is listening who is going through a loss like mine, especially where they're thinking about the rest of their life and the life that they've lost in addition to their person. I really advise try to just live like for each day. When I do that, it's things feel a lot softer when I think about how final it is and what this could mean for myself and my future and things like that. It becomes really overwhelming because I'm not just dealing with today, I'm dealing with an entire life. And I just think that in other moments too, where I have just been like, okay, I'm just going to deal with today. What do I have to do today? How can I take care of myself, etc. It helps to lighten the grief load.
To like just zoom in. What's happening in the next hour, 2 hours, 8 hours? This is what I can focus on.
Exactly. Yes.
Christine, I have one last question for you. I'm trying to figure out the right way to say this. With the life that you live of moving around quite a bit, a lot of travel, do you have a particular object or some practice that helps you keep Alex close to you as you go from place to place?
Um, I have his handwriting on my rib cage. I have the word love that he wrote in a note to me, and th I see that like every time I, get in and out of the shower and stuff, and that always keeps him very close by. He's also in my thoughts literally every day. I still think about him at some point throughout the day. Those two things are the things that always keep him close. The tattoo and then also just like thinking about him. And a lot of the time too, because I still live in Europe, we met in Europe. He was born in Europe, and I'm traveling a lot in Europe. I'll see something or be doing something, and there'll be some kind of like reference to him. And even if nobody else knows about it, I'll just think about him. And I'm like, if I was just in Scotland over the holidays with some friends, and I went by myself to the beach that was near where my friend was. And it's a long story that doesn't really matter. But the point is, Scotland meant something kind of to Alex. And I was walking down the beach and I was like looking, and it was just so, so Scottish and so pretty. And I was thinking again, like, okay, like if he could see me right now, he would be so happy that I was standing here. And in those moments, I feel a very, very strong connection. I used to wear his necklace that he was wearing when he died, but I also don't want to lose it. So just keeping those kind of that memory, and like if he knew I was doing this, he'd be happy. Like that kind of stuff keeps me feeling connected and like I'm making good choices when I'm really feeling like I'm really embodying that.
That seems, I don't like to use the word perfect in relation to grief, but it does seem like the perfect thing for someone who is traveling a lot to have something that you take with you everywhere on your body as a tattoo. And then also just to have him in your mind, in your heart, and being able to have those moments of connecting with him as you move around in different parts of the continent. So, yeah, I appreciate that, Christina. And wondering for listeners who might want to connect with you or know someone who might be wanting to connect with you for the work that you do, what's the best place for people to find you?
That would be my website. So ChristinaBabich.com. So ChristinaBabich.com. I'm also on Substack, and I write a lot about different mental health topics, and it's a free resource that anybody can, follow and get it straight into your mailbox once a week. So that's Substack. Oh my God, ChristinaBabich.substack.com. Did I say Substack the whole time?
Just that first time, just that second time, I think.
Oh,
So that's
okay,
all right.
good.
And
Okay.
listeners, don't worry, listeners, I'll put the links in there. So you'll be able to find Christina at her website and also at her Substack. So, Christina, thank you first for reaching out to me so that we could have this conversation and for sharing so openly about Alex and what he meant to you, what he means to you, and how that experience continues to inform the work that you're doing to support other people in their grief and trauma. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. As I told you when we started, I actually listen to this podcast a lot, so it feels really cool to be sitting and talking to you right now and sharing my story. So thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you again, Christina, and listeners out there. Thank you for being part of our community, for listening to the show, for sharing episodes with people who might be helped or supported in some way by what we're talking about here. If you want to reach out to me, you can email me at griefoutloud@dougy.org. That's our website, dougy.org. And there you'll find all the information about our local programming, all of our free downloadable resources, and of course, each and every episode of Grief Out Loud. I'm always excited to share that the podcast is sponsored in part by the Chester Stephan Endowment Fund. Grief Out Loud is a production of Dougy Center, the National Grief Center for Children and Families in Portland, Oregon. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us again next time.